I prefer to use streamer fly necks, big capes off the back end of a rooster, as opposed to saddle hackle, because I can get hackles that oppose one another and lie flat on top of the fly. People seem to have a lot of trouble with this particular stage in tying a streamer. I don't even know when I developed this little method that I use, but it's a method in which I'm not marrying the feathers. I'm simply laying these two, there's two on each side. It calls for 4 saddle hackles, 4 hackles in the wing, and these are olive hackles. I lay them so they're facing one another so that they curve inward, and that will make a nice flat wing. If you have wings on a streamer fly that don't ride straight up over the fly, it's going to make your fly spin. The other trick with these hackles is to make sure that the ends are the same length, and you just have to adjust them so that the tips of them are pretty much the same. Now the next part of this is to pinch your hackle, your wing, at the point where you're actually going to be tying it in. Cut the butts off. I have the 4 hackles stacked together. Cut the butts off, and then strip the hackle fibers off of that butt, so that what you have is these clean ends of that hackle, those 4 hackles lying parallel to one another, and then simply pinch them onto the top of the fly, and ideally they won't crisscross, but they'll lie parallel to one another, and in that way you get a wing that is flat and perpendicular.
Yeah, that's one of the most difficult parts of doing these flies, is keeping those wings straight. I like the way you build the unit, the wing unit in your hand is like a modular unit, and then you strip the butts and put it on complete, as opposed to trying to put one feather on at a time. Right, left, right, left.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really nice technique, Peter.
Mrs. Stevens, because her flies were to be used just swinging below a boat or trolled for the most part, and she was a commercial tyer, so she might be tying 40 or 50 of these at a time of this one pattern, would glue the wing, the whole wing assembly together. In other words, she would take 2 or 1 of these long wing hackles, okay, and she would glue what we're going to do next onto that wing hackle, and then we're going to actually finish this fly with a jungle cock cheek, and she would glue that to the wood duck. Now, instead of wood duck, I'm using dyed mallard flank, which is less expensive but equally as attractive. And these are called shoulders on a streamer fly. And you want them to be the same length on each side, and you simply tie them in along the wing, 1 on each side. And if you're concerned about what they look like, a rotary vise in this case is very helpful, so that you can look to the back side, which is your front side. 2 things you need if you want to be a serious classic streamer fly tyer are a good sturdy vise and jungle cock, which fortunately, again, after many years of being completely illegal and unobtainable, is now available because we have some farmers who are actually raising jungle cock domestically. Jungle cock used to come from India, and because the bird is endangered, because we fly tyers use so much of it, it now can no longer be exported from India. So fortunately, we have some domestic bird farmers raising jungle cock. It is not cheap. You're going to be looking at about $100 to $150, depending on quality, for one of these capes. When junglecock was largely unavailable, many substitutes were created. Probably the best of which were plastic eyes in the shape of these little junglecock neck feathers that were photographically printed. They make a horrible noise when you're casting them, which I found very irritating.
They flutter.
And they won't lie flat on the fly. Ultimately, they will, start to come off. They'll flap out off of the fly. And so I was very happy when junglecock became available again. I don't know if you can see this on the camera, but this is about 8 inches of 4-pound test monofilament line. This is my whip finisher. I use it to build my rods with, and I use it to tie my flies with. What I do, and let me do this in reverse so you can see it. I simply have the loop of this little piece of monofilament coming out ahead of the head of the fly. And now, because I need to tie it, well, let me see if I can tie it this way. Yeah, I'll tie it in reverse. You just wrap, not too many. If you put too many turns of thread over it, you won't be able to pull it through. But then what you're going to do is you're going to pull your bobbin down, keeping the thread pinched, and simply put the cut end of the thread through the loop, and then pull it back. One of the distinguishing features of Mrs. Stevens' flies is that she almost always put a contrasting color band on the head of her flies. In the case of this Green Beauty, she calls for an orange band. So I just simply use a bobbin full of orange thread, the same bobbin that I used to tie the underbody with, and wrap a thin little band of the orange thread around the center of the head. And then again, we'll show you the whip finish, the Thompson whip finish. I'm sure the least expensive whip finishing tool on the planet. And it's a nice little discreet band of orange thread. Pull the bobbin down, drop the thread through the eye, hold tension on it, pull the monofilament back with the thread in it. Next to final step is a little bit of water-based color preserver, and I do this when we put these bands on these heads. If I just put lacquer on this little orange band, it would get much darker and wouldn't hold its color contrast to the black. So I put a little bit of rod building, water soluble color preserver on the head of that fly. Now, people who run fly tying shops have just cringed that I suggested that rather than use a $10 metal whip finisher, that you use a little piece of monofilament line as a whip finisher. And I've, as I said, have spent many years tying flies commercially, and I went through periods of using various specialty head cements for my flies, one of which actually fish the fly and you take it out of the water and you look and the head cement had already fallen off it. So I stopped using that. More recently, probably in the last 10 years, I have begun to use almost exclusively these little clear nail polish. And it's they're called Hard as Nails or Wet and Wild. You can buy them at your local drugstore.
Oh, the fly shops are going to love you.
I know. Sorry.
Yeah, I like the brush.
And
Yeah, that's always nice.
you have a brush in the container, so you don't have to go and get a special brush.
You know,
Carrie Stevens' Green Beauty.
yeah, that's a beauty, is right. It really is a beauty. Now, I'd like to just plug your book one more time. if anyone's interested in the book, they can go to flyrodreel.com/node/12998. That's flyrodreel.com/node/12998. And see a nice little video that we produced on the Mr. Thompson's book. So, yeah, Peter, thanks for being here tonight. This is really amazing. What a treat. All the little nuances that go into this fly really make the difference between a professional job and what I might probably tie up as an amateur fly. But they do work. We've caught fish on them in our Finger Lakes and Lake Ontario. So, again, thanks for being here, Mr. Thompson.
You're quite welcome. Pleasure.
Well, that's it, folks. We will see you down the road later on. Thanks for being here, too. Take care now.